Hi, Tanuvi Ethunandan, you're the CEO and the co-founder of Data Duopoly. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of PhocusWire Pulse to talk specifically about the traveller experience as it relates to tours, activities, experiences. First thing to say is congratulations, a belated congratulations on being named one of our Hot 25 travel startups for 2022. So again, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So we've been talking to hotels about the guest experience. After this session, we're talking to an airport tech operator, and we've been talking to alternative accommodations and others. Specifically, what we want to get a sense of with you is, what would you say broadly, if you can, what's the state of the kind of the guest, the visitor experience in tours and activities at the moment?
I think the key thing right now is that people are still cautious. Especially, I think a lot of people in the industry thought the recovery was happening quite quickly, sort of the Q3, Q4 2021. And then we sort of were delivered a low blow with Omicron. And I think that pushed back the recovery slightly. So as we sort of enter the new year, things have been picking up with the February half term happening in the UK. Things are getting a lot more exciting and things are getting busy. People are looking at Easter and quite excited to book various events and seeing what they can do at visitor attractions. But it's overall a sense of delayed recovery. And I think for a lot of places that's been quite frustrating. And actually now looking at solutions, how can you actually digitize and potentially monitor footfall in case something like this happens again? So you have the data you already need. And I think that's a really big trend at the moment.
Would you say digitization is something that you referenced there? Pre-pandemic, I mean, you and I spoke actually on the eve of the pandemic at the Travel Tech Show in London, and a week later, everything went crazy. ITB was cancelled, and that feels like a generation ago. But I'm curious to what did you think the kind of the state from a tech perspective for the guest experience was in tours and activities? And do you sense that digitalization, the word you referenced, has it accelerated in the same way that hotels, for example, are saying digitalization has accelerated in their particular sector?
I think one thing we've really been seeing is there's a lot more appetite for it, that people are realizing it's at the forefront of their mind and it's actually really important. But the realities are, we can't forget that we've just been in a COVID pandemic. Many countries have been in lockdowns. Unfortunately, many of these operators have closed down or take staff on furlough. So there's still a little bit of immediate crisis management going on. And as we enter this recovery, I think that's the real turning point. So actually, what tools can aid that recovery? What can streamline the process, but also can deliver long-term benefits? And it was really lovely that you mentioned hotels. And I think people are so much more familiar now with actually contactless check-in and check-out. And actually, you can do it on an app. And actually, that's a much better visitor experience in the long term. So that transition hasn't yet happened in the visitor attraction sector, but it's slowly happening. And I think people want to move away from timed entries. I think that was very popular during lockdowns because they could control the numbers. Whilst very effective, it really took out the spontaneity of the visitor experience. So I think from a visitor perspective, you want to explore a new area. You want to have a long lunch and then maybe go down and have your tour, a little bit later, because you have that flexibility. You don't want it to be a jam-packed phyloflax of a day. And I think it's about getting that balance. And so how can digital support that, giving the visitors much confidence to come in, but also the flexibility they want, but also the tools and data the venue needs to manage that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, what would you say in the short term are some kind of like simple improvements that an activity provider can make to start thinking about improving the traveller experience or the visitor experience?
I think the first thing is just to understand what people want. I think people are so excited to come back. So I think just opening your doors is the best thing you possibly can do, because people are desperate to try something new. I think secondly, it's actually understanding how visitors use your space, and do you have that data? Because then you can start seeing, what can I do to improve things? So for example, just using an example, if you spend about £1 million on a brand new exhibit, but the reality is people spend on average 10 minutes of their dwell time there. Well, that's a lot of money for 10 minutes to keep them there. But if you've just spent maybe £30,000 on a brand new slide in the play area and people spend on average half an hour there, having that data can be really valuable going forward. So I think it's first looking, where's your starting point? where's your end goal, and then what are the little steps we can take to begin with. So whether that is just visually looking out, where are your people, and taking a bit of a quick audit manually. Is it actually looking at ticket sales and saying, can we spot any trends because we have that data already? Is it looking at your seats at the cash till at the gift shop and identifying where actually the hotspots are? And then sort of thinking, can we use a more sophisticated solution going forward? But I think that's a really immediate step and data that many venues already have, and they can start analysing it really.
So if we could say those are short-term simple improvements, what would be some of the bigger investments that are perhaps geared towards the kind of the long-term improvements that can be made in an activity provider?
Well, I think the first thing is actually knowing what all your visitors are, and that's such powerful data. And that could be through location back tracking, that could be through CCTV cameras if you have those installed, but that could be quite expensive if you don't. It could be actually using sort of existing apps and counting footfall that way, using beacons, or actually using GPS technology, integrating with the provider, maybe like ourselves through our API, and actually getting that dashboard and heat map of what's happening could be really valuable. And then actually basing your long-term strategic decisions on that. And on a much more granular level, your operational ones, knowing that there's a bottleneck at the gift shop right now means you can allocate your staff there. And I think actually a much broader issue that's happening in the travel, tourism and hospitality sector that many people are skirting around because it's such a big one and you've got so many other things going on, is the staff crisis. That actually you need to be a lot more engaged in how can you use the staff you already have in the most optimum way to deliver the best possible visitor experience. And that is all underpinned by data on visitor flow.
The Eden project in Cornwall is one of your kind of flagship clients that you've worked with. Is that the kind of technology and approach that they've taken?
Yes, certainly. So when we did our pilot with them back in 2019, actually the understanding that footfall data was really important. But more importantly, it was actually how do you shift people? This was a pre-pandemic world, but actually if the canteen's really busy, how can we incentivize people potentially go to the restaurant where there's an upsell opportunity? How can we encourage people to stop at the gift shop rather than like running to the car on the way out? And actually having a push notification within an app to say, by the way, did you know at the gift shop we might want to offer you a half-price coffee if you buy a slice of cake? That's really powerful. And actually, we've now worked with the National Trust Partnership down in West Cornwall. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the visitor have a better experience, but not just drive up and visit one site, but actually interact with all the exhibits and units available on site to really increase their dwell time, improve their experience, and ultimately drive increases in revenue, because suddenly that one visitor becomes a lot more valuable. And I think that's really important for not only sustainable tourism, but just to aid the recovery as well.
You said right at the beginning, everyone just wants to get out and enjoy stuff and do so, in a safe and hygienic way. What else do you sense consumers or visitors to an attraction, what else do they want? They obviously don't want queues. They want to have a good time. Is there anything, as we've become much more a digital society, that they want that you think attractions can give them?
I think a lot of people want on-demand information. And I mean, I use this mainly more in the cultural sector, where we've all seen signage, which is fantastic about telling a story, but it's quite static. And actually, lots of people now want dynamic content. They want things that can be updated, things that are a little bit more interactive. And I think the key challenge many attractions are facing is how do they connect with the 3-year-old? How do they connect with the teenager in the family group? And how do they connect maybe with the grandma and the grandparents, And you can't put the signage for everyone. It'll be completely covered on the site.
Is it as simple as just providing all the information on one of these things?
That is an excellent way to do it. And actually making it engaging, because people don't want to read a PDF on a phone. I would say that's the worst possible way to go around it. It's actually about creating something digitally that complements the physical experience. And I think that's a really key distinction. But how can you gamify the experience, make it interactive, and actually have that digital actually enhanced experience for your visitor in the physical one?
Okay. What other technology would you say can be deployed in an attraction or an activity to just really start taking this on a little bit?
There's so many things, and I think it really depends what sort of attraction it is. I mean, immediately when I think of theme parks, we've all seen the sort of queue estimated times and then been grossly disappointed when it said 5 minutes, you turn up and you see a 50, what is basically an hour-long queue, but there's a lag on the system. That's really frustrating. So ways to sort of give that information to the visitor can be really powerful in, let's say, a theme park setting. But actually, maybe if you think about holiday parks, for example, you might not want to book your archery slot at 3 p.m. because, again, it goes down to that really prescriptive nature. But it'd be great if you could just see, oh, I know there's a 3 p.m. available slot. I suddenly feel like doing it. I can just book it online. I can maybe just walk up, pay there, but I know when I'm going, it's going to be available. So it's not a wasted trip. So I think it's also about making things a lot easier for the visitor. People are tired of pre-planning everything. And I think what we really need to do as an industry is bring back that spontaneity and bring back that holiday spirit where people are quite carefree rather than meticulously planning and booking everything in advance. While there are some things that are inevitable, I think where you keep spontaneity, you also get a lot more repeat customer and those extra customers that might be coming along and because they know they can.
I wonder if it's, what do you sense, Tanuvi, is gauging how far this can go? Because you sometimes see pictures of, I don't know, the Louvre in Paris, and there's just, they allow people to wander around with their phones, and in front of the Mona Lisa, there's like 30 phones up, and you wonder sometimes, and you worry sometimes that we've kind of become so ingrained with these damn things that we lose sight of what the original experience is. So how does an experience or an activity operator get a sense of how far they can push technology without it becoming a bit of a pain in the arse? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that comes first down to the design of what you want and really thinking about it, not by just hearing something, this sounds really cool, or, I want to try VR or AR without actually understanding what your visitor wants. I think that's the real key piece. It's like, why are your visitors turning up to your visitor attraction? Is it to actually soak up that culture and the atmosphere? So how can a digital tool enhance that, not detract, but enhance it? Or equally, are people coming up to go on thrilling roller coaster rides? How can a digital experience enhance that? So it's really understanding that at the beginning. So I would think, the really famous example, I believe it was at Thorpe Park with the Darren Brown Oculus. I think it was like one of the VR headsets, and they thought it was going to be amazing. And actually the queues were consistently over 15 minutes, an hour, because it took so long to wipe down all the headsets and people felt nauseous. And actually, that was a really cool idea and it was amazing. And it's great that it was tried. That's fantastic. But it didn't quite work. But actually, what people wanted, they wanted to try something in real life and do it rather than putting on a screen, which they could do at home. That's why they turned up at the theme park. And again, it's understanding why people traveled away to come to your venue, and then what can I do to enhance it? So yes, there is a danger, but there won't be if you understand what you're trying to achieve at the beginning.
It's almost like tech for tech's sake, isn't it? Sometimes you do just need to take a step back and say, look, let's just let people wander around and do this organically rather than digitally. So are there any kind of permanent changes? You talked at the beginning, Tanuvi, about kind of queuing and kind of limiting throughput and stuff like that because of social distancing. Do you sense there are going to be any long-lasting changes to the way an attraction or an activity provider operates because of the things that they put in when they tried or they did reopen?
You know what? I think a lot of venues really liked actually the ticketed booking system at specific times. Many normally would just have an all-day pass and then couldn't plan for the surge in visitor numbers, maybe all at the opening time between 10 and 11, and the max exodus probably at 4 to 5. So while it's really desirable, it's actually how can you take the learnings from the COVID pandemic where timed entry slots gave you that sort of estimation of who's coming at what time, but actually giving that spontaneity back to the visitor, but still taking that management process. And I think that's really where actually real-time data becomes so important. And going back to my piece about that's where you can allocate your staff most effectively. So I think in the long term, it really is understanding visitor flow is going to be at the forefront of many venues' mind, really, to help them do that.
Okay. And last of all, grab your crystal ball from under the desk there if you can. But what do you sense? Where does all this go? I mean, we're talking to the next session after us is about airport technology. And, if there is a common complaint, we ask anybody about what can be improved in the travel experience. Everyone always says the airport. And there are some things that are happening there around biometrics and things like that, which are very exciting, maybe improve the airport experience. But for activities, where does this potentially go, let's say 5 to 10 years time, based on what some of the technology is that's kind of coming down the pipe?
I think it's a really exciting time actually for visitor attractions and activities. I think the digitization is just coming around for this sector. And I actually think people are going to find places in a much new, novel way, which is going to be really exciting. We're not just going to be having those leaflets at visitor information centres. People are going to be able to find what they need in a much more filtered way. I think something like that's going to be coming up. I also think actually people are going to know where busy areas are. So we're not all going to go to the same spot, be stuck in a queue and feel frustrated. We're going to know before we even plan our day where we should be going to get the best possible experience for us. So if, for example, it's a family and they want something quieter because it's easier with the children, or if actually it's, a group of friends who want a party atmosphere and want to be where someone's like quite bustling, they can make that informed choice. And I think it's really exciting because suddenly visitors are going to be in control. They're going to have the data at their fingertips, but it's actually going to help them make the best possible use of their holiday or day out, because that's all going to be there. So it's a really exciting time.
Do you see an opportunity at some point for an activity which has a completely different type of revenue model from, say, an airport, but to take the plunge and install things like biometrics to help with various elements around an attraction? Is that something that you see them possibly happening, or is that a little bit too either high tech or not needed? It's solving a problem that doesn't actually exist, for example.
So when you talk about biometrics, I'm sort of thinking facial recognition. I'm thinking, that's really exciting when we unlock our phone. But is it essential? If you're going to a museum, do we need to know your face? Then you've got to store that data. It's got to be secure. When actually all do you need to know is how people move around the site. You don't need to know who that person is. And from your ticket sale data, you might know sort of what demographic they are. That might be a questionnaire. So do you actually have the data already? And I think there's a real misconception that actually you need to install lots of expensive bits of hardware to get all this data, when actually you might be sitting on a data gold mine already. And it's sifting through that to make that understandable, maybe integrating with a user-friendly dashboard, which we at Data Duopoly could certainly help with. But it's actually working with what you've got and actually making it really cost effective. And I think that's going to be the best way forward.
Yeah, I was talking to my son about this a while ago. We'd been to an amusement park, and they take the picture of you as you're coming down the roller coaster, and then you queue up at the end. And if you want to pay 25 quid for the photo, you get it. What you would rather have is the photo is taken of you automatically, and then it appears on your phone straight away because they've recognized your face. But anyway, that's a grand idea from a 13-year-old. So our time is up, unfortunately. So Tanuvi Ethunandan from Data Duopoly, thank you very much for talking to us on PhocusWire Pulse. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.